Before this video starts, I'd just like to make an announcement. I have the Liberal Tears mug for $14.99 on my website. It is the first link in the description if you want to go pick one up. Don't worry if it breaks when it comes to your house. I'll send you another one for free out of my pocket. I don't care. I want you to get your Liberal Tear mug. It comes in Liberal Tears white with the face, black with the face, white without the face, and black without the face. So pick whichever one you want, and it'll come to your door in about 3 to 5 days. So that should be epic. First link in the description. Thank you. Let's go on with the video.
Well, first, you wouldn't lose 6 million American jobs. You know, I think one of the reasons President Trump was elected is that he promised that he would defend the American worker and defend American jobs. There are estimates that this agreement, which is unfair and punishes America in a much greater fashion than other countries, that we would lose 6.5 million jobs. Meanwhile, countries like India and countries like Iran, we would have to pay them to reduce their carbon emissions. I can't imagine a worse agreement than this thing for the American worker. But I think this is something that President Trump promised the voters. He was going to keep American jobs here, and he wasn't going to sign crazy agreements that don't have our best interest at heart.
Where would these, I don't know what study you're referring to, Senator, where would these 6 million American jobs come from? It seems like a rather dire prediction.
Well, they're in the energy industry. A lot of ours have been lost in Kentucky. We've lost, you know, nearly 90,000 jobs in the coal industry because of excessive regulation. So if America, under this accord, has to reduce her carbon input by 20%, but China doesn't have to reduce their carbon footprint at all, how could that possibly be fair? Who in their right mind would sign something that says China doesn't have to do anything and we have to reduce? When you reduce your carbon footprint, it means you're going to have to reduce your energy output, or you have to convert to other sources, but there may not be enough energy from the other sources, and so then we're talking about going without energy.
How much
jobs
are
related
the US,
to American jobs?
How much should the U.S. reduce its carbon footprint?
Under the accord, it's about a 20% reduction.
Right, no, but how much do you think it should be?
China doesn't have to reduce it at all.
How much do you think it should be?
Well, I don't know if anybody can tell you right offhand the number. I can say we should try to constrain pollution. We should try to control pollution, and I think we have been doing that for 50 or 60 years, and I think we should continue. But, you know, your previous guest sounded like, you know, my goodness, the sky is falling, mass extinction, really? So I don't think we should be alarmist about this. I mean, the planet's 4.5 billion years old. We have gone through great extremes of climate change, natural, and now we may have a man-made influence as well. But these people, the question I always ask these alarmists is, how much is nature and how much is man? They act as if it's a given that man is the only source of climate change. Well, my goodness, the great climate changes in our history all happened before the Industrial Revolution. So is there climate change? Can man have an impact? Yes, but let's don't be so alarmist as to say such outrageous things that if we don't sign the Paris Accords, there's going to be mass extinction. That is a ridiculous statement.
Well, I don't know if it's a direct cause and effect relationship, but obviously scientists, you can go on to the nasa.gov website right now and see what the effects are of man-made climate change. I mean, some of them.
But if you look at the accord, even the intergovernmental committee that promotes all of this, even they say it might be 0.2 degrees over 100 years. And you also need to make sure your viewers know that most of their modeling has been wrong. They readjust their modeling every year because they haven't been very good at predicting things. Predicting the future is notoriously difficult, and this is modeling is not an exact science. It is a science that has variability and probability.
But they have been predicting for years that temperatures would go up, that glaciers would shrink, that sea would disappear, that oceans would rise, that the sea level would rise, that there would be longer and more intense heat waves, and all of that has happened, Senator. All of it has happened.
Yeah, but Jake, before man was even on the planet, before we even were burning fires, the oceans were 300 feet shallower. When people walked across from Asia, probably 20, 30,000 years ago, maybe up to 100,000 years ago, the seas were 300 feet shallower. That's why they could walk across the Bering Straits.
Are you really saying that man is not not contributing to climate change? I mean, is it? Do you really?
What I'm saying, you know what I'm saying, and this is the big argument that none of you guys get and nobody ever looks at is how much is nature and how much is man. I'm perfectly willing to admit that man can have an influence and that we should minimize our pollution. But those who say that it is all man and don't acknowledge that the 4.5 billion-year-old planet has gone through massive climate change based on natural effects. I don't know.
It has gone through climate change, absolutely, but not to the degree that we've seen in the last century. And let me just read this. This is from the NASA. Let me read this from the NASA website.
Absolutely incorrect. When you look at climate change, the most dramatic ice ages, the dramatic warming and cooling of the planet all happened before man was even around for the most part.
Okay.
And even when man was here, man was only burning fires. So we've had carbon in the air 600 times what we have now. And so it's gone up and down. And I'm not saying we should forgive and discount pollution, but we should not be so alarmist that we're willing to give up all the American jobs based on computer modeling that has been notoriously inaccurate over the last 15 years.
I just want to read this from the NASA website. The current warming trend is of particular significance because most of it is extremely likely, and they define that as greater than 95% probability, to be the result of human activity since the mid-20th century and proceeding at a rate that is unprecedented over decades to millennia. So you're saying that those are NASA's, those are the NASA scientists.
I know, but why did we change the name from global warming to climate change? Because there's some uncertainty now whether it's getting warmer or colder. And I can tell you, if you look at the details of the modeling and the projections in the last 15 years, they've been altered almost every year because their modeling doesn't add up. All of these people saying we're going to have a 100-foot rise in our seas in the next 100 years, that kind of alarmism is not scientific. And actually, if you read many of the people who do want to control pollution, they will tell you that that's nonsense. And so a 100-foot rise in the seas in 100 years, the seas are 300 feet higher now than they were when man came across the Bering Straits, but that took thousands and thousands of years.
But so I'm just trying to get a straight answer on this question here about whether or not this NASA scientist I just quoted, whether they're wrong.
People who are saying that we're going to have mass extinction are wrong. People who say we're going to have a 100-foot rise in the oceans in the next 100 years are wrong. And the climatologists who have predicted things over the last 15 years have been, on large part, their modeling has been inaccurate and has had to be reformulated because the numbers you put in don't add up to what they're saying is occurring.
I'm not talking about the most dire extreme predictions, but even if there is a rise in the sea level of 5 feet or 10 feet, that can have a huge disruptive effect on.
And I think it's completely unknown whether it'll be 5 inches or 5 feet. And I think until you have evidence that shows that we really are in such alarmist straits.
So wait for it to happen?
No, I think you have to have some evidence, though, and you should base things on evidence. And for the American worker that makes $20,000, $25,000 a year working in the American energy sector, to tell him we're just going to, him or her, that you're not going to have a job and China doesn't have to obey the same rules. The whole reason this Paris Accord should be done is not a debate over global warming or climate change or whatever you want to call it. It should be a debate over whether it's fair. Is it fair for China to keep polluting at alarming rates and to be the one cutting back on carbon and China does do nothing? Is it fair that Russia gets to increase their carbon output by 50%? That is not fair to America. It's not fair to the American workers. And I'm betting you that the viewership will say, you know what? America will say, we'd like to have jobs, and we don't want these alarmists who are saying that we're going to have mass extinction. We don't want these people in charge. They were in charge.
I wish someone could come save me right now from you.
Right, well, nobody has to save you because you're a fucking white man who gets to do whatever he wants to in this space, right? Aren't you quite aware by holding that video camera on me that you are surrounded by your privilege, right? Take your privilege somewhere else, please.
Oh yeah! Hey, that sounds classic. Real classic. You incestual piece of shit! You incestual piece of shit! What is America? Because white supremacy. What is he saying? White fucking
That's how we feel about Nazis.
That's how we feel about Nazis and colonialism.
There you go.
Leave out this flag.
Hey, this
It's
flag
our
is
property. Sorry.
genocide. This is a flag of occupation.
This is a flag of occupation. Colonialism. Genocide. Slavery. And we're going to burn that shit. We're going to burn what that shit symbolizes. Fuck that shit. This represents slavery, colonialism, genocide, oppression. And it's all right to burn that shit.
Burn, baby, burn.
Burn, baby, burn. Burn that colonialism.
Burn, baby, burn. Burn, baby, burn.
Fuck colonialism.
Burn.
Fuck colonialism. Fuck genocide. Fuck slavery. That's what it stands for. Your ancestors were enslaved, and that's what that stands for. Your ancestors were enslaved, and that's what that stands for. What did you say?
What do you want to bring up ISIS? ISIS has nothing to do with Islam. ISIS has everything to do with the U.S. imperialism. Who created ISIS?
Motherfucker. You look like an Uncle Tom, motherfucker. Your ancestors were taken here, and your ancestors were enslaved, you fucking idiot.
Hello everyone! Hey, I'm just stopping by to remind you that liberals are insane! Social justice warriors are becoming more violent and triggered than ever before. Anyways, be sure to subscribe to KGP TV on YouTube and have a blessed day. Yeah, man!
Comes in liberal tiers: white with the face, black with the face, white without the face, and black without the face. So pick whichever one you want, and it'll come to your door in about 3 to 5 days. So that should be epic. First link in the description. Thank you. Let's go on with the video.
Well, first, you wouldn't lose 6 million American jobs. You know, I think one of the reasons President Trump was elected is that he promised that he would defend the American worker and defend American jobs. There are estimates that this agreement, which is unfair and punishes America in a much greater fashion than other countries, that we would lose 6.5 million jobs. Meanwhile, countries like India and countries like Iran, we would have to pay them to reduce their carbon emissions. I can't imagine a worse agreement than this thing for the American worker. But I think this is something that President Trump promised the voters. He was going to keep American jobs here, and he wasn't going to sign crazy agreements that don't have our best interest at heart.
Where would these, I don't know what study you're referring to, Senator, where would these 6
Before this video starts, I'd just like to make an announcement. I have the Liberal Tears mug for $14.99 on my website. It is the first link in the description if you want to go pick one up. Don't worry if it breaks when it comes to your house. I'll send you another one for free out of my pocket. I don't care. I want you to get your Liberal Tear mug. It